Hey guys, welcome to the Asian Hustle Network podcast. My name is Brian.
And my name is Maggie.
And we interview Asian entrepreneurs around the world to amplify their voices and empower Asians to pursue their dreams and goals.
We believe that each person has a message and a unique story from their entrepreneurial journey that they can share with all of us.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Asian Hustle Network podcast. My name is Maggie.
My name is Brian.
And today we have two special guests with us. They are Mikkoh Chen and Ruan. Mikkoh is a Taiwanese-American entrepreneur and diversity champion. The Los Angeles native turned New Yorker is driven by building scalable platforms that aim to shift societal norms and create greater equity across all mediums. Mikkoh co-leads Gold House's success arm, including the top accelerator for Asian-led businesses, Gold Rush. He has made it a mission to unite all types of entrepreneurs and inspire the next generation of community and business leaders. Megan is a Chinese-American entrepreneur, investor, and advocate based in New York City. Born and raised in the Midwest, she is passionate about building communities in which women and minorities have equal access to mentorship, funding, and media representation. Megan co-heads Gold House's initiatives for founder and investor success. Over the past 18 months, Megan, Mikkoh, and their team have built Gold Rush from the ground up, creating a program that provides one-on-one advisorship, networking, and educational seminars to hundreds of founders. Mikkoh and Megan, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We're super excited to have you guys today, and that's an impressive introduction. But I want to hear a little more about you guys as well, like where you guys grew up, what was your upbringing like, and why are you so driven to help the Asian community?
Absolutely. I can go first. So I was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So Midwest, very homogenous community growing up, not a lot of people that looked like me. And so for me, I have a sister. So luckily I had, one other person that shared my experience. It was very different from what I experience now, having lived on the East Coast for several years, having gone to college on the East Coast, and now working in New York City. So I think the biggest takeaway that I have from my upbringing is that it's difficult to not grow up with a community of people that look like you. And it's really, really important to try to build that for others so that they can get it as soon as possible in their adolescence, and so that they don't have to wait until they're, 24, 25, post-college, like well into their first career, having made potentially life-altering decisions based on not having that type of community.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's really powerful too. And, that story really resonates with me. I mean, one of the early use cases that we have for Asian Hustle Network was, Asians who were born in the Midwest. Like we felt like there's a need to feel like they're part of the community. We wanted to create Asian Hustle Network to solve that problem. Because I know Nico and I can relate, and he can share a story in a bit. And we grew up in a heavily Asian area where we never felt like we were minorities at all. If anything, we felt like we were majority all the time.
Yeah.
And feeling the need to create that network for people outside our area or circle is really important for AHN. And I really like what you guys are doing with Gold House. Nico, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, of course. So Mikkoh, I grew up in the suburbs of LA. If people know Diamond Bar, it is predominantly Asian. And so, to really echo what Megan just talked about in terms of like growing up without a community and kind of that piece, I relate a lot to that just, in my experiences being a gay man. I grew up in Diamond Bar, which was very Christian. It was actually quite hard to come out, especially as a gay man, and having at that time pretty conservative Tiger Asian parents. But I think that's kind of why I think this community piece and building this kind of tribe was so important, and why it's important for probably many of us is that, we don't want to feel alone. I've tried to start companies in the past, and I've gone through many startups, and that journey is super lonely. And what I want, and what Megan, probably you guys as well, is that to build that community so we can really correlate together. We can share war stories, share resources, mentors, guidance, etc. And that is just so invaluable. And, and money and, all these different things. It's really about having that connection in that time. So I think for me, it's, being kind of alone when I was younger, and then now building kind of these platforms and communities to really strive together is super important for us.
Yeah, I love that. We always have people who are joining AHN and they're looking for some sort of like community organization. And it's once you find that commonality, it's without the community, it's very hard for you to like understand and have people understand your story. Mm-hmm. So just find that like common ground for you to like connect with others and for you to like share stories of like how your parents immigrated here, the type of values and that they instilled in you. It's like very important.
I also want to add that both you guys are really brave.
Yeah.
Like starting out and building your community as well, like for Gold House is extremely difficult. Mm-hmm. There's so many situations where it's so unexpected. And you're like, wow, like I didn't know people can be that way. But I do want to take some time to talk a little more about Gold House too, and how they got started, its mission statement, and especially I want you guys to cover Gold Rush. I think it's a great initiative.
Just to talk a little about Gold House itself. So Gold House is a nonprofit. It's aimed to empower the Asian community to live more authentic lives, to be more successful, and to live longer lives. Megan and I, as you said before, we co-lead the success arm of Gold House, which consists of 3 pieces. So the first is that Gold Rush Accelerator. The second is the Founder Network. And the third is the Angel Network. We truly wanted to create an ecosystem where that focuses on founder success. And this origin story of Gold Rush it goes back probably a year and change ago. So when I told you before that I tried to pursue creating a startup in the past. I wanted to focus on a company that focuses on mental health for men specifically. And during this time, I was having a really difficult time finding a community of like-minded Asian founders, to be honest. And actually, this is before AHN was born. And during that time as well, I decided to create a super lightweight version of what Gold Rush is today. And at that time, I also had just met Mikkoh Chen, who is Gold House's chairman, and I explained to him, what that vision was for Gold Rush, and ultimately we decided to really merge the ideas. I had known about Gold House and its successes through, Gold Open, which promotes and celebrates Asian-led films, and I knew that with the full backing of Gold House itself, honestly, I felt like we could really achieve anything, and at that time, it just made a lot more sense for us to do that. So about a month or so after that meeting, I signed on to be the first venture director of Gold Rush. And, we say this phrase a lot, but I think it actually was a true example of the phrase, we can wait for a seat at the table or we can create our own. And, I couldn't find what I was looking for. So I decided that we needed to build one. But I think what truly was really pivotal in the growth and expansion of the success arm and Gold Rush itself was actually bringing on Megan as my co-director to truly allow for that arm to transpire. Megan, do you actually want to talk quickly about, some of the network, how the accelerator's grown, the network, a Founder Network and Angel, just given that you worked on it quite extensively, obviously with us and the team.
Yeah, so just to put Gold Rush also into like the wider Gold House context, you guys might already know this, but Gold House originated and a lot of the founding members were really pivotal pieces of the entertainment and media business. And that's why the first kind of runaway success for Gold House was Gold Open, because they had this media and PR engine, this firepower, and they realized they were able to harness it to support Asians in film, Asians in other types of media and what have you. And so I think when we first decided we were going to then redirect that into Gold Rush, we realized that one of the differentiating things that we can do for founders is really, really help accelerate their brands. So our Gold Rush Accelerator is not only about educating founders and pairing them with mentors who can help them one-on-one and hold their hands through the tough parts of starting a business, but also really getting their brands out to influencers, to people who can take it from 0 to 100 much more quickly than you can if you just chip away at the brand. So we had a lot of success doing that with the Gold Rush Accelerator. But what we realized was the scale is so small compared to the type of impact that we were hoping to have. For us to work with 10 to 15 founders twice a year, that's what, 30 to 40 companies max. And so what we realized is we really wanted to expand this. And that was the impetus for the Founder Network, which we just launched actually a couple of months ago. The Founder Network is kind of, you can think of it as Gold Rush Lite. So you get a similar experience to founders going through the accelerator in a slightly less intimate way. And you're part of a much larger cohort of Asian founders who are all, starting companies across a variety of industries at varying stages, different types of products and services. But what they all have in common is that they're looking for this community of other like-minded founders who have the experience of being a minority in a very, very tough business. So that was why we created the Founder Network. The third leg of Gold House's success arm is our Angel Network. And the reason that we decided to launch the Angel Network is twofold. One, the same type of underrepresentation and underfunding that Asian entrepreneurs experience is also experienced by Asian investors. And you can see this when you look at the number of Asian fund managers that there are in VC, private equity, you name it. And so one of the pieces that we really wanted to focus on was making sure there's also a similar community for Asian investors. So our Angel Network encompasses everything from institutional VCs who are looking for an ethnicity-based affinity community, to angel investors who have some experience investing in startups, to cultural leaders. You can think of celebrities, people who may not have direct experience investing in startups, but are really looking to. And so you can see where I'm going with this, where we're building both sides of the coin, where we have not only one of the most extensive capital networks in existence among Asian investors, but also the capacity to connect them with founders who are high promise, high potential, and happen to be raising capital.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I really love that initiative. It's so cool. I'm not gonna lie, I can't think of any other words.
We like to put the puzzle pieces together.
Yeah, I like it a lot. And then going back to what Mikkoh said earlier as well, he does bring up a really big issue. Like, we can't find communities out there like this. Why haven't they been existed for such a long time? Like, why is all the stuff that we're doing right now so recent? That's a huge problem. And when you look to the history of like Asian communities, like most of the time we had to start our community because no one else did it before us. We're like always underrepresented in many, many different ways, and that's what we feel.
Yeah. And I feel like a part of the reason also is because it goes back to our generational limiting beliefs, right? From our parents. And they've often told us that we shouldn't raise our voices, we should always stay quiet. And so I think that because of that societal norm, people look at us in that certain way, right? And that's why we don't get as much, benefits as other, groups and ethnicities. And going back to Mikkoh's point about, finding mental health services for men, I think that relates to, the whole Asian community, because mental health is often deemed as something that doesn't even exist in Asian communities, right? And if we talk to our parents about mental health, most of the time they don't even think it's actually a real thing, right? And so that's why a goal for AHN, and I'm sure a goal for Gold House, of course, is so that we can talk more about mental health and create these opportunities more for Asian communities. I also read in Megan's bio that Gold Rush companies have raised over $250 million in funding so far. So that's incredible to hear. Congratulations on all of that success. So Brian and I, since running AHN, we have started this community since November of 2019. And, due to COVID, we've experienced a lot of, just occurrences where, people will ask us questions like, oh, why are you guys supporting this community? Why don't you guys take out the word Asian so that you guys can just be hustle network? Little things like that try to steer us in a certain direction. And try to tell us like, you guys should do this and you guys should do that. Why aren't you guys, benefiting all communities rather than just the Asian community? Have you guys dealt with any struggles in that sense for Gold House? And have you guys had any experiences where people had told you to steer the direction of Gold House in a certain direction?
So what I will say is, people always want to give their opinion, and opinions are very welcome. We definitely want to incorporate the voices of our community as we build. In terms of incorporating other communities besides just the Asian community, it's definitely something that we have thought about since the very beginning, that Gold House has thought about since day one, and something that we've really brought into fruition over the last 6 months or so with our All of Us movement. So you guys, if you aren't aware, the All of Us movement essentially seeks to bind our community with our Black and Brown sister and brother communities, and make sure that the efforts that we are implementing to support founders, to support small businesses, are more encompassing of and even though Gold House is Pan-Asian, we are not just focused on East Asian or Southeast Asian or South Asian. It's across all. We are obviously not the only minority. So we definitely want to be and play that role of rising tide, lifting all boats. So that is what our All of Us movement is for. And it's meant to represent the third pillar of Gold House, which is unity.
I think just to add on as well, I don't think we've received as much about like, hey, you guys should be, not just doing this for Asian people and whatnot. But I have heard it in the really early days of Gold Rush itself. I think something that really resonated with me, especially during those timeframes, was there's two things. One is I know you guys had Patrick as one of your interviewees as well, but Patrick talks a lot about focus, and I think it's really important to recognize, especially when you're in the beginning stages, that you really should focus on like what you can do, what you should be doing, and doing it super, 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 super well. And I think that's really important to understand, especially as an entrepreneur, and even as an advisor or a mentor, to tell people that like, hey, make sure you get this right before you can expand your value proposition or even expanding it to a different target audience. So I think that's one really thing that really resonated with me, especially as I started out doing this alone, and that advice being given from Patrick. And I think the second really big thing later on, is, are you guys the right platform to be doing that? And so, I think many people reach out to, me, Megan, the Gold House team for a gamut of things. They're like, can you do this? Can you do that? Can we do that? Yeah. And I think it's great. I think it's great that we've built enough clout and prestige and reputation for us to be that person or that organization to be called on to do X, Y, and Z things. But are we the right organization to be doing that specific piece? The answer could be yes, but the answer also could be no. And that route, maybe it's a better option for people to partner with someone who's better suited to kind of do that piece. I think that's a kind of different way to look at it. And that's some of the advice I would give if someone were kind of like redirecting some advice for you to be more expansive or to expand even before you're ready to, or even should be doing.
Yeah, that's really, really good advice, and that's classic Patrick right there. Yeah. Like during our podcast as well, he's like, you need to focus.
Yeah, he also talked about focus.
Yeah, it's awesome that, you guys are focusing, but one thing that I'm kind of curious about as well, how did your cultural upbringing help you sort of pick a niche that you want to focus on within Gold House and Gold Rush? that part always intrigues me a lot, because from my background, I really love the entrepreneurial side. I love doing business. I love meeting people. When it came time to start my own community, like it kind of linked into everything that I grew up with, my cultural identity, my hobbies. I love listening to like CNN's Great Big Story. I used to be an avid follower of Humans in New York. When it came time to create Asian Hustle Network, I wanted to embody all these things. So I'm kind of curious too, like what kind of factors in your personal life help you make decisions that help you guys pick a niche for Gold Rush and Gold House?
To answer a question about how I found my way through the many ventures and many opportunities, I think at Gold House specifically is, I grew up, so a little context is, my dad started his own company and he rode the .com and technology boom, and in seeing that, from zero to what it is today and whatnot was incredible. It was like, I was like that kid who really wanted to know, how to build startups and like, what does it take from go to 0 employees to 10 to 100, all that jazz. I was just enamored by it and just in shock of like this kind of experience. And, on the flip side though, I also saw honestly a little bit lonely that journey is, and how much struggle that is, especially for immigrant parents, trying to make it in the US and in Asia and etc. Like I saw both sides of kind of like the exciting piece of it, and also that journey of doing this alone and having a lot of obstacles on the way. And so I think a lot of that led to me wanting to dive into the startup world in general. And then from there, I was just really passionate about figuring out how to become the best operator, how to really grow and scale companies from the ground up. And I think I've taken that kind of like passion and behaviors and kind of those learnings to find what Gold Rush and that concept is, which truly is to really nurture and help and support founders to grow, whether it's a funding perspective, whether it's business development, whether it's marketing or brand situation. I think from those perspectives, it's for me, it's always just like, how can I best help you guys? How can I best help serve this piece? More so because I'm just super interested about helping founders and those startups, having seen it when I was growing up.
I think my story has a lot of parallels to Mikkoh and a couple of differences that have led me to, and I know this won't be a satisfying answer, but not really have a niche. The way I would explain that is, so my parents are also immigrants to the US, and they both came to the States on government scholarships to pursue graduate education. And so for them, this idea of security was always number one, and their hope for their children was always to be able to make a steady living, not necessarily venture too far out of their comfort zone, and not to take outsized risk. So that was always this concept that was drilled into me, was like, find a well-paying job that allows you to support a family. I think that's not unique at all to the first generation experience. So what that resulted in, though, and this kind of goes back to my earlier comment about timing, is that I never met an entrepreneur until well into college. So for me, the idea of starting my own business was so foreign and out of the realm of what I would ever imagine, that now it's almost ironic that I, volunteer for a nonprofit building their founder accelerator. But I think what it taught me is that I really wanted to be there to create this type of community for others like me, others who may not have had this kind of example set before them at a young age, and maybe could have benefited from seeing that and having the kind of reassurance and security net that if they are to take this leap, it's going to be okay. So I think that's why working on our founder and investor initiatives is so valuable to me, and also I think propels my professional interests on top of Gold House, which is I think investing in these startups is one of the most impactful things that you can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can absolutely resonate with that. And I think a lot of Asian people can resonate with that as well. I grew up, my family, I come from a very non-entrepreneurial background. And none of my family members are entrepreneurs. And my parents had expected me to, just go to college, get a well-paying job, and retire at the age of 65. Very typical Asian parents. And I think a lot of people can resonate with that.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely, I wish I met you guys a lot earlier into my early 20s, because with my childhood, it's slightly more different. My parents escaped the Vietnam War, and when they came here, they were extremely poor. In fact, we were so poor, I was in welfare throughout my entire childhood and my teenage years. And when I got to college, I didn't know what entrepreneur was. I didn't know what it meant. I thought that my parents became entrepreneurs because they had to become entrepreneurs. They couldn't speak English that well, for myself at least, growing up, I never ate out at all. I never went to any American restaurants. Going to eat Denny's. I remember going to Denny's my first time in college, and my friend's like, "This is Denny's, bro." I'm like, "Dude, Denny's, it's awesome." And everyone made fun of me because I couldn't hold a fork correctly because no one taught me to. That was really that poor. I was wearing the same clothes for majority of high school and college, and I kind of see what you guys are building here, the value that you bring. It's not just the community; it's the mindset and the connections, that what's possible. And I sort of wish that we met each other at a much younger age, because I think that we could totally collaborate in our early 20s, do something crazy. But I still think that we have time right now to still collaborate and do something crazy. And yeah, I love what you're doing. I'm just thinking back to my own life, my own childhood. I'm like, damn, I wish I had this before, I consider myself a super late bloomer. But I didn't think it was possible until I've been in my mid-20s, where I'm like, oh, my coworker has side hustle. What the hell is a side hustle?
Just to quickly comment on that, I think one thing I think is really important is one, it's better late than ever that we're collaborating right now. And I think it's important for more organizations like us to really be more cohesive, to partner together. I think there's this instant thing where oh, they're doing something similar, therefore we're immediate competition. And I don't think me, Megan, or any of the Gold Task team, by the way, sees it as that form, is that we amplify each other and we're all here for the same cause, and we're not here to, butt heads on situations. I'm sure there's a way to, I always think there's a win-win solution in all these scenarios. And I think it's important for us to have an open dialogue about what's going on and how do we really amplify and build each other and co-elevate together. I think that's a really, really important factor. And I think through that, to be fully honest, it's to what you're saying. I would, what we want, or at least when I first started this idea of Gold Rush, is I wanted to be able to share stories and to and show people that we're making it, we're creating our own table, we're creating our own businesses to accelerate the current and the present founder base that we have now, but truly it is also to inspire the next generation of Asian leaders. We are kind of setting the framework and the foundation and the groundwork of those people, just as the people generation before us did for us, to even be able to do a podcast, to be able to create an accelerator and whatnot. And so I think that's really important for us to know, and then to band together for.
Agree. Yeah. Absolutely agree. Brian and I talk about that all the time.
Non-competition. We need more of us.
Exactly. And I'm sure, after Gold House was founded, I'm sure you have seen a lot more, organizations try to start the same thing. And that's what we experienced for Asian Hustle Network as well. After we started the Facebook group, we started seeing many, many more Facebook groups. And I'm sure it was due to, COVID as well, where people just wanted to bring the Asian community together.
Yeah.
But, just similar to what you said, Mikkoh, it's not a competition. And if we do see it as a competition, then that defeats the purpose, right? Our goal is so that we can bring the Asian community together.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because we see other ethnicities create the same thing. I think there was someone who reached out to us and said that they wanted to start a Latino hustle network. And to us, it was more of wow, that's amazing. That's an amazing movement that we're starting. And for us to be that inspiration for other communities as well is just very inspirational. And
going back to what you said as well, our culture is rooted in competition.
Yeah.
We're competing against our siblings, our cousins, our friends.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's because of times of war, our ethnicities in the Asian culture, we compete with each other too. Like the Vietnamese always sticks with the Vietnamese people, the Chinese sticks with the Chinese. And, Brian always says that our culture is very fragmented, and we have to find a way for us to, bring ourselves together because we're all, we have this commonality. We all have the same goals. Why don't we come together and reach them together?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, just one more thing. I actually wanted to comment, especially since I grew up on the West Coast, and you two as well. I think that what was really interesting about moving from the West Coast to New York was this idea of this concept of Asian helping other Asians wasn't as common. And I went to UCSD. I lived in San Francisco for 4 years. Like, I grew up in LA. Like, you're just friends with everybody. People want to support you. And it wasn't until I moved to the East Coast, and this is not to bag on the East Coast or anything, but like, it was truly a time frame where I actually felt like, whoa, I'm a minority. Like, I am an Asian person. And if you're in a room and there are 2 Asian people or whatnot, I think it's like, wow, okay, who's going to be that token Asian person who's going to survive the circle? And it was similar in when I was in startup in technology, where I was one of the few person of color managers who was in the room. And I'm just like, guys, like, I would love for another person to be here, not for a competition factor, for us to celebrate and to really drive this business together, or to really collaborate together. So I think that was an interesting distinction to kind of like feel as I transitioned the coasts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good to know. I mean, we have considered moving to New York sometime pretty soon. Partner up and build a
welcome.
Megan, definitely want to hear from you as well and your thoughts on this.
Specifically regarding like the community aspect, or
I'm just kind of curious about like what Mikkoh said about the East Coast and what your experience in New York's like.
Well, I work in finance, so I think that's all I need to say. I think it's even more. So here's what I'll say. I moved to the East Coast fully expecting it to be a foreign experience, and fully expecting there to be a lot of rooms that I walked into where I was the only woman, the only person of color, or both. And that has definitely played out. I think that the attitude that I've kind of taken is, if you can be different and better, then do it. And if you can turn it to your advantage and kind of surprise people with either your knowledge or your empathy or your ability to connect to others, even when you don't look like anyone else who's around you, then you should lean into that. So that's kind of the approach that I've taken. My first job out of college was at a big bank. And so it was kind of a sink or swim situation. And I think a lot of us are familiar with what that's like. But I think a lot of us do sink because it just feels very foreign and sometimes very unwelcoming. And so I think like New York is kind of, New Yorkers are not known for being the nicest people in the world, whether or not that's true. And I think it just takes a tough skin a little bit. But I think that what it means is when you do find people that feel like a tribe, that feel like a community, you cling to them even closer. And that's part of the reason why actually Gold House has been so meaningful to me, is being able to find a safe space and find people who've shared my experience and make that journey a little bit easier.
Yeah, I love that a lot too. And to echo about people in New York not being nice, we do agree sometimes, because we visit New York a good amount of times, and every time we open the door for someone, no one ever says thank you. I'm like, oh, that's kind of awesome.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I went to New York with Brian once, and I asked someone to take a picture for us, and he said no. I said, thank you for the honesty.
Thank you. We'll bring the SoCal hospitality there. But yeah, just kind of bring the topic back to like Gold House and whatnot. We want to hear more about what's next for you guys. Like, how are you guys navigating your COVID situation? How has it evolved since the very beginning to now? And what have you seen in the community too? Like, have people been more helping, panicking? more innovative, more scarcity or abundance mindset? What is your observation like?
I think just to quickly comment on, the pandemic itself, I honestly think this is providing our founders new room to create more space, to pivot, to even ask for more help. Like, I think it's interesting because, Megan and I we deal with so many founders at this point, and just really on an intimate basis, whether it's talking about, temporary like financial relief, or them doing a campaign to support hospitals and health systems during this time frame, or even doing promotionals. Like, it's just a gamut of things. And to me, it's been really actually awesome to kind of see like, well, how do we help you? Great. Like, we actually have to think on our feet a little bit more about like, okay, what are the right people who are industry leaders, who can be mentors and advisors to really help navigate the situation that no one knows like what's going to happen ultimately. But I think what the pandemic has caused is create this new playground and different rule sets that it does leave a lot more room for business growth and expansion and an opportunity. And so from that perspective, I think it's allowed for, honestly, me, Megan, one, to keep us on our toes, but two, to just really critically think about how can we best support them in the most effective and impactful way. Megan, I don't know if you feel differently about that.
I think you hit a lot of really good points, Mikkoh. I think what COVID really did for us that I think was a huge favor was force us to adapt to this virtual environment in a way that actually made our programming a lot more scalable. So in the past, we had worked with a lot of founders just by happenstance that happened to be based either in New York, LA, or San Francisco, because those were kind of our strongholds where we had physical representation and where we were able to host a lot of in-person events. Now, with everything being via Zoom or via some other type of online platform, it's actually made it feel more accessible. And now we have founders in all kinds of cities, and they don't feel like because they aren't in one of the 3 places that we're hosting in-person events that they're left out of the program. I also think that Mikkoh's absolutely right. Like, COVID forced us to become so innovative. So just to share a specific example, back in the spring, we were working with a ton of food and beverage founders. And as you guys know, COVID hit the restaurant industry particularly harshly. So one of the things that we're very proud of this year was partnerships with food delivery platforms, including Postmates. And we were able to drive ton of traffic to Asian restaurants across the country purely by collaborating to have these carousels that featured Asian restaurants and pushed them to the top of people's feeds and made it really apparent, and kind of was that like little behavioral nudge that people needed to then go back and support these brick and mortar businesses. So I think there were actually a lot of positive results as silver linings to everything that's been going on. And in terms of our future plans for expansion, it really made us think about what do we want this to look like in 3 years? What do we want this to look like in 5 years? How are we going to create something that lasts beyond either Mikkoh or me and our current team? How do we make something that stands on its own?
Wow, extremely powerful.
Yeah.
I love that so much, especially the last name as well. We always think about like how can we create Asian Hustle Network that would last longer than us, because this is something that's still needed with or without us for our communities, and listening to what you just said about, working with Postmates and pushing more Asian restaurants on top, and it highlights more importance that we need to step up and we need to keep advocating for support to our communities. Like, no one else is going to do that for us. And unfortunately, not a lot of us are speaking up. Only some of us are. When some of us speak up, it only creates little waves. When all of us speak up, it creates a bigger wave. It makes bigger change. And I want to advocate that more and more for the Asian community. Like, we need to speak up. Like, we need to stand up. Like, a lot of us are just taking things as they come. We're not we're not too reactive to a situation, which is a good and bad thing, you know. In Asian culture, it's like, okay, something bad happens, it's a test, like it's testing your determination, your will, all jazz. But like for this type of situation, it's a new playing field, it's a new board game, it's a new generation. Like we can't sit back and just take it as punishment or take it as like a test, you know. It's not a test. Like we're trying to make a change, and I really like that you guys are doing this initiative a lot.
Yeah, and I think Mikkoh mentioned earlier that you guys are laying the foundation for the next generation. I think that's really important to point out too, because a lot of people have this mentality where why do you guys even do anything? You guys won't be changing anything. It doesn't matter how much work you put into it. Everything will stay the same. That's the mentality that people have, that some people have. But it's. I think we see it more as like, if we don't do anything, we're actually heading downhill instead. For us to create these movements and for the next generation to see them, that gives them inspiration to do something for their own generation. And it'll, more so create this trickle effect, and it'll, go down to more and more generations. So I think it's really important for us to speak up, like Brian said. Yeah. So very curious, with the time that you guys have started Gold House, have you guys been experiencing any like struggles or challenges with any of the initiatives that you've had with Gold Rush, Gold Open? What are some of the challenges that you faced, and how did you guys overcome it? Yeah,
no, I'm happy to talk about a little bit. I think, to be honest, I don't think we've had immense struggles outside of the transition period. I don't think it would be a struggle per se. I think because, and this is for everybody too, is that as the pandemic shifted, not shifted, as it came, me and Megan really had to like shift gears really quickly. How do we readjust and create this program that really provides a platform and mechanism and machine to really support these founders, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to think about it too, like Gold Rush and all of Gold House minus 2 people are volunteers. We all have a day job. Right. Megan's an investor. I lead ops for a healthcare startup, which obviously is a little bit intense right now. But, I think from that perspective, it was, how do we really pivot in the right ways really quickly to make sure that we can still support the founders that are in our alumni base who are incoming, and then while running kind of our full-time jobs and supporting ourselves and taking care of ourselves, as that's is also really important. So I think for that perspective, I actually think it was a really fun exercise for me and Megan to be able to be like, okay, what do we do given our service and our platform, and how do we actually expand our value proposition to be able to accommodate for the changing environments that we have at this moment. So yeah, that I think would be like something that we had to deal with in the past year.
Mm-hmm. I think also just with regards to a more ongoing challenge, I think as we support all these entrepreneurs across different industries, across sectors, across stages in whether it be their fundraising or their other types of development, we tend to think of like taking on the challenges of our founders as our own challenges. And so because of that, there are so many layers to the types of service and the types of support that we need to create. And I think that has been the challenge in terms of how do we build out an advisor program that can not only help a company that, sells e-commerce, like retail products versus one that is a CPG company. How do we make sure that the experience and the type of programming and the speakers that we bring in are relevant to people across the board? That has definitely been a learning experience for us. I think for both of us though, or maybe I'll just speak for myself, I had the way I kind of dealt with this was to have a mindset shift to say like, we are also entrepreneurs and creators alongside the founders that we're working with. And I think the moment I started giving myself that freedom and flexibility to think of myself also as an entrepreneur alongside them, it allowed me to think bigger and remove some of these kind of like self-imposed mental limits on what we could do for our program, for our founders, and be able to visualize what else we might be able to build.
Yeah, that's really powerful too. And we can totally relate the last statement as well. sometimes we kind of reevaluate everything, and suddenly we feel like anything that we want to do is really possible. But that's also the scary feeling too. It's like, oh crap, we can do anything. What could we do? Like, what should we do? And you feel overwhelmed all the time, you know? Out of curiosity too, like, what does the future look like for not only for you guys as individuals, but your organization as well? I know that's a big loaded question.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for Success Farms specifically, we have our roadmap. We have the 3 pieces of the program that we want to build to create this intimate experience for founders, to create a wider network for entrepreneurs of all sorts, and then to build this investor network that cross-collaborates across both of the other ventures. And so I think in terms of Mikkoh and my specific purview for founder and investor success, we know what we need to build, and we just have to go out and do it. And we have to do it in a way that makes sure that it's sustainable. And if one of us were to get hit by a car, God forbid, like we'd still be able to do this, and we'd be able to bring on someone else who shared our vision and shared our motivation and still be able to build this. I think for Goldhouse overall, and I don't want to speak for others in the organization, but I do think that the impetus is similar. I think what we're working towards now is building this lasting organization that self-sustains and is perpetual and continues to build these strong partnerships with other cultural leaders in our community, whether they're Asian or not, and makes sure that the members of the Goldhouse community and the Asian community and the broader minority community have access to the same types of resources and representation. So,
yeah, no, I think Megan hit it on the nail. I think ultimately it's time. We need to scale at this point. Right. We got to self-sustain. We got to make sure that we have the right playbooks in place. I think given that we have, been in hypergrowth, I'd say for the past 2 years, it's now time to figure out what's the next stage of this company or this nonprofit or the startup, and how can we really make sure that this is going to sustain and last for years to come, and do what we both are trying to achieve is to really inspire the next generation to be that platform and that mechanism for young entrepreneurs or Goldhouse members or just Asian advocates in general. That's kind of really the focus for Goldhouse on that front.
We'd love to know, how founders and investors can get involved with Goldhouse, and what our listeners can do to help with Goldhouse's initiatives. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So to learn more about all of the initiatives, go to goldhouse.org, and you will be able to read about all of our initiatives, from the A100 list to Gold Open to Gold Rush, the accelerator, to all of these different initiatives for founders and investors. Specifically, we will be hosting our fall Black Friday sale starting November 27th. And that will be a 5-day online promotion for our fall 2020 Gold Rush founders. So you'll be able to access exclusive discounts, buy their products, and get to know the stories of these founders that we work so closely with.
Yeah, and just to add on there, I think me and Megan are truly people who love to meet founders and investors and just that community and ecosystem in general. So if you guys want to reach out to us directly, sure, we'll send out some emails, or, it's Mikkoh and Megan at goldhouse.org. So feel free to email us. We'd love to chat with you guys.
Mm-hmm. You can also subscribe to our newsletter. If you go on the Goldhouse website, there is an option to subscribe.
Well, it was amazing listening to both of your stories. Do you have any final closing remarks or any advice that you can give to our listeners? I think a majority of our demographic are aspiring entrepreneurs, people who are just trying to get started in their side hustle or side business. So if you guys have any closing remarks or advice for them, that would be amazing.
Yeah, for sure. So I think the advice I would give is there's no right way. I think there's no right way to start. I think that many people really hear that phrase, there's never a good time, which is true. But I think there are so many other factors in pushing forward that will impede someone from doing that, from taking that leap. And I think it's more about taking that first step that will snowball into something new and magical. Ariana Huffington talks a lot about the micro steps, and there's a ton of studies about its strategies, its successes, and its benefits. But and I don't think it's much different here. I think the inability to really move forward, whether it's to start a company or make pivots within a company, I think the more decision debt that you create, the fewer facts, knowledge, and pieces you really gain. And again, this is not to really say to blindly move forward. Be smart and intentional about your decisions, but it's really important to understand that there will be waves that will take you to new heights and pivots, which will drive your business forward. So I encourage you guys to take that first step and then learn as you go from there.
My advice is pretty tactical. It's to practice storytelling. I think that this is the single most important thing that you can do as a founder, whether you are going to be, fundraising, pitching roles at your company that you want someone talented to come and work for you, convincing customers to buy your product or service. I think as a founder, you are constantly going to need to storytell. And I think that people may not always remember what you say or do, but if you are a compelling storyteller, they will always remember how you made them feel.
Absolutely agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for being on the podcast today. We learned so much and it's extremely enjoyable. Thank you much. Thank you so much for that.
And thank you two for all that you do, and to the Gold House team as well for all the initiative that you guys are driving out for the Asian community.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for having us.
Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe to the show.
We would like to get to the top 10 on iTunes, so be sure to leave us a 5-star review. We release an episode every single Wednesday, so stay tuned.
Thank you guys so much.